Welcome everybody. My name's Joe Colburn. I'm with Critical Mass for the Visual Arts. I want to welcome you guys all out to the stage tonight. We're going to be discussing art and geography. As you know, I want to give you just a little bit of background on Critical Mass in case you are not aware. Critical Mass for the Visual Arts is a nonprofit, self-formed visual arts collaborative dedicated to promoting, enhancing, and initiating contemporary visual art in the St. Louis region. And in addition to Critical Conversations, we also have several other programs, including Creative Stimulus. And then we also have our Public Works project. And our artist, Jessica Witte, is here tonight. She did Seed the Change, which was on the riverfront this weekend, which she describes as a shifting collaborative drawing in collaboration with the public. And so this is just one of many, things that we try to offer the community. But as far as Critical Conversations goes, Critical Conversations seeks to spark revolution in the St. Louis art world. We aim to strengthen vital connections between individuals, institutions, spaces, and creative communities, and to set the stage for profound criticism and discussion on a wide range of topics. We inspire action through increased understanding, agency, and accountability among creatives, administrators, academics, and critics. And so this is an ongoing series, and you'll be able to find the video for this particular talk later this week. And I want to get us started. I want to introduce Vanity Gee. Vanity is an educator, musician, and cultural curator. Prior to her appointment as Director of Community Programs and Grand Center Operations at Craft Alliance, Vanity made extensive efforts to cultivate community, neighborliness, and leadership through the arts as Program Manager of Rebuild Foundation Hyde Park. Before Rebuild, Vanity was a Romare Bearden Graduate Fellow at the St. Louis Art Museum and Community Youth Services Specialist at Leslie Bates Davis Neighborhood House. She currently serves as a committee member and the web mistress for the Harvard Graduate School of Education, Arts and Education Alumni Group, continuing the conversation, and on the advisory board of Arts Connect International. So let's have a hand for Vanity and for our panelists.
Hey, y'all. You can say hey back. Hey. All right, I'm kind of loosey-goosey and informal, so I won't be like Anderson Cooper up here hosting a presidential debate or anything like that. But so I'm kind of goofy, and I might make a joke here or there, but just know that that's me, and I'm kind of awkward. So I'm just going to introduce our fabulous panelists here tonight. First, to my immediate right, we have Miss Elizabeth Vega. Say hello, Elizabeth. Yeah. Elizabeth is a Chicana activist, blogger, and community artist. She is the co-founder of Artivists, a collective of artists committed to direct action and making social justice visual. Artivists most recently created a mirrored casket reflected the unrest in Ferguson, which was accepted into the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. She is also a co-founder of Roots Co-op, which stands for Resistance, Organizing, Ownership, Transformation, and Solidarity. And it's a housing cooperative for Black and Brown activists. She is a full-time graduate student at the University of Missouri St. Louis's Clinical Mental Health Program. She's a performance poet, an educator, community arts training, AKA CAT fellow, and she's also heavily involved in various community arts projects throughout the St. Louis region. Let's give her a hand. Next is Sukanya Mani, and she is currently working for Chesterfield Parks Recreation and Arts as a recreation specialist for arts and entertainment. In her role, Sukanya creates and organizes multiple art initiatives and outreach to expand community engagement. Sukanya is also a visual artist. As an immigrant, she is constantly building bridges between where she comes from and where she lives today. Her latest work explores contemporary life through the lens of multiple ancient art forms: ancient India, Aboriginal, and Egyptian art, fusing to tell a modern American story. Let's give her a hand. Next is Terry Suhre, and he is currently the director of Gallery 210 and a research professor at the University of Missouri St. Louis. Prior to his appointment at UMSL, Terry was the director of the Catherine Smith Gallery at Appalachian State University. He began his career at the Illinois State Museum in Springfield, where he worked for a decade. And since 1983, he has organized and curated dozens of exhibitions. In addition to his university teaching and gallery responsibilities, Terry serves on several community arts boards and is active as a guest curator and juror. Let's welcome Terry. Next up is Amanda Cologne-Smith, who is the current program director at Dutchtown South Community Corporation in South City. She works with residents and stakeholders in the Dutchtown, Gravois Park, Marine Villa, and Mount Pleasant neighborhoods. The organization focuses on housing development and stabilization, as well as community planning and facilitation. Through various activities, Amanda seeks to engage residents and support them in building the neighborhoods they want and the neighborhoods they deserve. She is also motivated by the possibilities in integrating the arts into community development initiatives. She is a fellow in the Regional Arts Commission's CAT program and is a member of the leadership team with Yayo Arts Collective. Let's welcome Amanda. And last but not least, we have Matt Brinkmann, who is the Special Events Manager for Great Rivers Greenway, a position created specifically to reactivate the St. Louis riverfront. Matt's mission is to make the riverfront a showcase for creative local talent and a revitalized common gathering space where St. Louisans can connect, overcome social barriers, and get to know each other better. He is seeking ways to partner with local organizations and exploring opportunities to incorporate creative placemaking principles into the challenge of reviving our long-dormant riverfront. This strategy includes large festivals, street buskers, fitness classes, pop-up markets, and temporary art installations like Jessica Witte's Seed the Change project. Prior to his current position, he worked at the Sheldon Concert Hall, the St. Louis Convention and Visitors Commission, and the St. Louis Science Center. And he is also a recently retired member of, and he was a founding member of the Funky Butt Brass Band. Oh no, you left. You said I gotta go. Let's give Matt a round of applause. All right, so tonight we are going to be covering a very wide range of topics that are all related to the topic of art and geography in some way or form. There's a large possibility that you might have a question or a thought or a topic that we don't get to discuss, and that's okay. We encourage you to continue those conversations after here with your colleagues or peers, or maybe suggest it for another conversation later on. But you will have an opportunity throughout the evening as an audience member to express a comment that you have or to ask a question. And there will be a wireless mic that we'll pass around. All that we ask is that you be mindful of the time that you spend sharing your comment, and that if it is a question, to make it a clear and concise question so that you share airspace with your peers. And so frankly, that we have time to respond as a group and your peers have time to respond. So, you know, if you have a comment, you can just say it's a comment. You don't have to disguise it as a question to make a comment. That's okay. We're all guilty of it, so we all have done it at some point or the other. Okay, so we are just going to start off talking about kind of like art and public works. And then we'll move into a couple of other sections, mainly geographical collaborations and gentrification as it pertains to art and place. So when we first think of art and geography, some or many of us might imagine public or community art projects. We see it in our parks, our schools, on our public transportation, and in empty storefronts. And so what I'd like to ask all of you up here, really, what are public artworks? And just more broadly, kind of think about, how do each of you define public art? Who or what creates and drives what it becomes? What are the purposes of public art? How does this vary by place? And yeah, let's just start there. And this is locally, so you can think about your city, your neighborhood, examples abroad that you've seen as well. Anyone, take it away.
Y'all turned and looked at me. What was that? Well, I would say, first of all, public art is any art that is accessible to everyone. And I suppose by that, I first of all mean free, so that there are no economic barriers to enjoying it or hopefully participating in it as well. But yeah, to me, it would start with that.
Amanda, go ahead.
Okay. I guess the thing in terms of being expansive about it, I want to think about public art as process and not just product, and the creative engagement with whoever is supposed to be the consumers of that art, I think is also really interesting. How much we can make it something in terms of access. People truly can have an entree into it.
I think that public art is also used to define and identify communities. The arch is a symbol for St. Louis. Certain neighborhoods who have certain murals identify them as being of that place. So I say public art is also about identifying a place in general or sometimes quite specifically.
I would agree. I also would add that public art is something that interacts with its environment. So the same piece, if it's in a park or if it's in a building, can have a different impact. And I also I would like to think of public art as something that's interactive. It's something that you can feel and touch and come close to, versus just see something and don't touch, don't see this. Stand back and see it. So that accessibility is very important. Also, how it relates to its surroundings.
I think that public art, like Amanda said, is really about process, not the final product. And for me, I think that the accessibility is super, super important, because art is a doorway for a lot of people. And I work in a lot of neighborhoods where art is often not accessible, and there's magic that happens when you have all of that, where it's interacting with its environment, where it's process-driven, but it's also people-driven as well. And you have people that are thinking about things that they couldn't have done, didn't think that they could do, and they created. And that sense of pride and ownership that starts with the individual but then radiates out to the community.
That's great. With each of your definitions of public art, I'd love to hear some examples of successful public art. And if each of you could kind of talk about an example and maybe what process or what parameters helped ensure a successful example of public art.
Well, I think for me, one of the things that I think about is the can-filled story wall that we did in the aftermath of the Ferguson protests. And it was sort of triggered by a 3-year-old at the protests who just looked kind of lost in the crowd and talked about how he saw Mike dead in the street. And from that, came this reality that in the midst of everything that was going on, there were many children who bore witness. And how do we help them process? And so we created this pop-up art space with no resources, really. We just started holding space in Canfield. And the story wall grew, and it told the experiences of people that were there, adults and children. And there were so many moments that happened as people were creating the art. But then as you step back and you see the breadth of the wall and the range of emotions, pride and sorrow and, love and anger and, all these human experiences distilled into these little panels. It was very powerful. And so the times that we've displayed it, there's been a lot of reaction, because it does tell a story. But it tells a story but from the vantage point of people who often are not always part of the narrative.
If you wouldn't mind, I would like to give 2 examples.
Go for it.
So one is the Awakening statue, which is in Chesterfield Central Park. This is a statue of a big giant rising out of the ground. It's a huge statue. You can see the face, the limbs, the hands, and the feet coming out. And when I talk about an interactive piece, the knee is just like an L shape. And I've seen kids climbing on it and sitting inside the giant's mouth and taking a photograph. It's a very beautiful family moment. You know, people come in to have a picnic, and then they make that art as part of the photographs that they take and the memories that they take with them. So that's one. The second one is something I don't know if many of you know. There is a Hindu temple in West County. It's off of Weedman Road. It's a beautiful piece of art. And you don't have to look at it as a cultural symbol. You can just come in and see the statues that are carved into the actual temple itself. You don't have to go in. You can see it from outside. There are 2 large elephants carved out of the ground. And the sculptors were brought in from India, and these are people who have been sculpting a very particular style of sculpture for hundreds of years. And they were brought in specially to carve these out. The temple is actually almost like a conical pyramid shape, and it's got different steps, and each step has a story of gods and goddesses just happening. It's local. It's just a little drive away. I would encourage everybody to go in and take a look. So.
For me, I'm going to talk about Joe at the Pulitzer. There are a few sculptures I've seen that are more embracing and meditative than that piece there, and I think it's a work that is quite severe in its obvious appearance, is quite beautiful and elegant once you participate within it, and it engages you in a way that is really contrary to the materials. I think it's quite an ingenious work of art, and I think it's one of the works in the city that represents us well and really illustrates that St. Louis is a world-class city when it comes to the visual arts.
I was thinking about a project that we did last year that I tried to, as often as possible, integrate community arts, simple, just painting with youth and community members in a vacant lot beautification effort that we did 10 vacant lots in Dutchtown. And so for each lot, trying to come up with a really unique landscaping or design approach that would really fit what the neighbors wanted or needed. But so many of those lots I thought of as they were just provocations. They were starting conversations of how do you relate to vacant space in your neighborhood. And so the process of having neighbors come out and dig in the dirt together and then, lay down gravel and paint bricks and, put something in, especially I think about, 2 of them where we had, intergenerational, where one of the daughter, I commissioned her to do a peace pole. You guys seen those? You paint on, may peace prevail on earth on the different sides. And then her mother and her grandmother came out and helped her. And then a couple of other kids from the neighborhood come together and, they're all in the zone and can we just do more and more? And they just wanted to paint everything, So is it, the most, structured? Is it the most, fine art? Though I did try to pair her with a more seasoned artist to also show her some technique, that it's really, an opportunity to say, hey, let's try something you haven't done before. And how does that relate to trying something different before in terms of shaping your neighborhood and dealing with land use? It's a parallel experience.
Well, the example that's currently most fresh in my mind, of course, is Jessica's See the Change project, which we just had down on the riverfront. A great example of, a participatory experience where she traced things out and then allowed and invited families and kids to come down and be a part of creating that design. So that's what made that a powerful experience for me and for people. It was a perfect opening for the riverfront, which just happened as of last week. So it was a great way to kind of kick things off and really kind of summed up, what it is I'm trying to achieve down there with that kind of activity. In addition to visual art, I've also been told I have permission to, talk about other areas, particularly my own background as a musician. and drawing on those experiences with, the wealth of opportunities that we have, particularly here in St. Louis, with things like all these free, park concerts that we get to enjoy, like the Whitaker series at the Garden and things like this, which I also consider public art. Some of the most rewarding experiences as a musician in a band, particularly, were the times when we could, go out and perform somewhere where most of the people in the audience did not look like I did. That was a powerful experience for us to see people, having that universal love of music like that. We all kind of disagree about what music, we enjoy at some extent, but it was fun to see that, take shape and take power, and I think that, as part of any discussion about public art, includes that.
Yeah, one thing or a couple of things that I keep hearing, that all of these successful examples of public art are intergenerational, and they're all participatory in some way. So whether it's kids clapping on the statue or they're making the art, it's families, it's folks of all different kinds of backgrounds coming together. It's not just art that's made and then displayed in a public arena. While that happens and has its own value, I'm very interested that it's all about people actually doing something together. It's about community creating the art. What might be some of the challenges in creating that type of public art? And a couple of you can speak if you like. Amanda, why don't you start? Especially being in a community-based organization.
Well, and I'm sorry I missed the last conversation because I'm thinking, man, I should have came to the one on funding. As I tell you, the troubles that I had to deal with using federal funding to try to fund public art, it was tricky, but I made my way. But, I think it's one of those things that, there are some people who get it, and I think St. Louis is a wonderful, Regional Arts Commission. It's just dope, it's just wonderful. But to really integrate that and expand that, to beyond individual grants, but to have a very consistent set of funding that doesn't have to be, I cross my fingers, I hope I get it, or to know that, private donors will see the value in process of the type of public art engagement aspects rather than wanting to commission someone to do some very, still large, beautiful thing, which is good too, but are those equally valued? I'll put that one out there and see if y'all have other experiences.
Anybody else?
I was going to say one of the problems with the public art, and this is a quote from Tom Huck, the problem with public art is the public. As he was repairing one of his broken pieces at Laumeier. And I think that is in part because in some instances, and up here, this is not this group of people certainly, but in some instances, well-meaning communities, institutions, agencies, and academies will plop something down in a community that they think they need it. And they haven't been consulted. And without any kind of real cultivation and ownership, they're forcing a different narrative on that community that's contrary. Not necessarily hostile, but it's contrary to what they want and what they expect, and frankly, what they can benefit from. And I think that is, that takes a lot of work. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, as these folks all do, to bring this community in, to engage with these ideas. Otherwise, it will fail.
What are some ways that you all have seen public art contribute either positively or negatively, or just as you said, Terry, counter to a community or a neighborhood? I'd like you to talk more about that, everybody, if you like. Go, Terry.
Oh, me? Okay.
You can go.
I don't want to name names, but in the city of Webster Groves, there is a particular sculpture in a little island where these roads intersect, and it is so terrible. It's an embarrassment to the city, and because of the political and economic situation, the persons who put it there, it can't be removed. So you have this wart on a really lovely part of town that they're stuck with. And on my campus, there are several pieces of sculpture that, if I could get a truck in there, and if Joe would help me, That would be gone. Because these things were forced on us. And it's not that they provoke, because you were talking about works provoking. Who was that? Somebody talking about works being provocative. And I think that's the least thing a work of art can do is be provocative. If it can't, but what happens is it is so nondescript. It's a nothing, and that's the ultimate failure of it. You know, so I feel like that's the problems I have with works that fail. It's not that they are provocative or controversial. It's that they're nothing. They're just nothing.
You said, how does public art affect the community?
Well, how does it contribute to narrative?
Contribute to the narrative. This is something that we are building towards. So because I work for Chesterfield Parks, Recreation and Arts, we have a beautiful outdoor amphitheater. And our idea is to make it a hub for the arts. So slowly what we're doing in the past couple of years is we have musical arts there. We have bands come in and perform. But the idea is to bring in different kinds of visual arts as well. The long-term plan or the long-term idea is for people to come in and say, okay, what's going on here today? You know, this is a Thursday, I know something's going to go on. So part of the surprise element, part of bringing in different kind of artists, and the idea is for the people to come in with an open mind, you know, to be surprised, to be, like you said, maybe they will like it, maybe they won't like it, but to come in and be surprised.
Well, part of that is also you have to cultivate that audience.
Right.
You know, you say you're developing them over
Right.
time, so they expect that.
Yes.
And I think to suddenly just show up at somebody's basically house and say, "This is for you. Why don't you love it?"
I think it's very important to get the feedback from the community.
Absolutely,
I think it's a
yeah.
very, very, it's a very important part of building any kind of a community art is to involve the community.
And I don't want the community to be dismissed, but you do need to have leadership there, and an informed leadership. People who have a sense of what's doable and what will be the best product for the available resources. Because if it's strictly community-based, where everybody has an equal voice, you can get some pretty uneven products out of that. I mean, everybody has a voice, but not everybody should design the bridge.
Matt, how do you hope that this revitalization and the arts that you're trying to incorporate into the riverfront, how do you hope that contributes to the narrative or the idea or the perception of St. Louis City or the riverfront specifically?
Oh, it's been an interesting process because it's not really a part of any particular neighborhood or community. It's sort of this totally neutral space over here. So in my more idealistic moments, I'm hoping that it somehow becomes this common gathering space where we can create these experiences that will bring people together from those different neighborhoods to try to just get to know each other better and understand each other. And then hopefully that translates into action that take place, you know, particularly in the areas that are facing the biggest challenges. That was what I was envisioning as part of our, you know, our big event that we had last week where we had this ridiculously long picnic table. I don't know where I got that idea, but I will never do it again. So we had this 2,016-foot long picnic table, the idea being that this, you know, this is a gathering place. It was not just Dee Nichols' birthday party. It was actually, although it apparently served that purpose very well. But that was sort of in one event, you know, my vision of what I'm hoping this becomes. Because nobody feels like, okay, this is my space, you're invited. You know, it sort of belongs to all of us. I mean, kind of like the role that Forest Park hopefully serves in our community is this neutral space where we all come together and hopefully something good comes out of that. So I'm hoping that the arts can sort of prompt those sort of interactions and discussions and just getting together and enjoying, you know, being with each other. So I'm continuing to explore that. It's an interesting thing, and I've pretty much been given free rein to pilot whatever will work, and hopefully lots of things will, and I'm sure some things won't, but that's going to be part of the fun.
May I say a very interesting experience I had as an immigrant from India. I came here in 1998, and I come from a very colorful, very loud country where every state has its own language, which is different written language, different spoken language. People dress differently, they look different. I came to St. Louis. This was where I landed. I was very excited to be part of this town. Within the first maybe 8-9 months, we took a trip to Kansas City. We lived in West County, and we went to visit a friend in Kansas City. I remember getting down from the car and seeing a Walgreens, seeing a Kmart, and saying, "Are you sure we've come to a different city?" I'm not kidding. I said, this looks like the names, there's a Manchester Road here. This doesn't make any sense. And I think and now that, it's taken a couple of years for me to understand the culture, and what you just said about the arts, that is what distinguishes the community. Because to me, it all looks geographically the same. The names look the same. The building color looks the same. But what is different is the art, and the art is what gives it a place, gives it a value, I feel. And I feel it very strongly here.
So, Matt, you brought up a really good point about a neutral space for people to participate in the arts or to experience the arts together. And that'll kind of lead us into our next area of, did you have a? Oh, okay.
I think it's coming.
This maybe will lead us into like another section of questions. And then after I ask this, I'll also open up the floor for audience questions or comments. So what has to be in place for people to feel welcome to participate in art in their own communities? And then how might people feel comfortable enough to participate in art in communities that aren't their own? So if it's not a neutral space like the riverfront or Forest Park, what parameters have to exist for a person from South City to say, I want to go to Old North or McPherson in the Central West End to experience art in these different communities? Or another way, or a different question, but it's similarly themed, I do live in South City, and I might be a resident and a longtime resident in Cherokee, but maybe the folks who program a lot of the art don't necessarily look like me in Cherokee Street. So how do I feel comfortable participating in art in my own neighborhood? What has to be in place for those things to happen?
I think that it has to be accessible.
Can you all hear?
I think it has to be foremost accessible, and I think.
And what does that mean?
Well, for me, it means that my house is. The kids come in and say, "Can we make art?" Like they surround my car. Can we come in and can we make art? And it's an opportunity to explore. Like one time they came in and we were eating fruit kebabs. And I looked and I was like, I bet that we have all the supplies to make kites. And so we Googled it. And I was, reading off the list of supplies to the kids, and they were like, we got all that. And so it was an opportunity to talk about how you can have everything you need within your community. But I also think about like the co-op has a lot of images of people of color. And I think that oftentimes we don't understand like how important that is, especially for a child, to be able to like come in and see the art reflected back at them that mirrors them and looks like them. I mean, I was so excited when the Chicano exhibit came to the Science Center, because it was one of the few times in my life that I was able to see art for me that had cultural relevance and resonated. And so I think that it needs to be accessible, it needs to be flexible, and it needs to be a reflection of the community, a true reflection of the community and inviting.
Go ahead, Amanda.
The thing that popped into my head immediately was about risk. Because I think whether you're going outside of your community or people are coming in and programming within your community you don't have a relationship with, it just comes down to, you know, what's really at stake, who's gonna possibly benefit or lose from this engagement. And I mean, if I'm going to another part of the city that I don't have a relationship with, and there's, you know, social, economic, racial segregation, am I gonna feel like I'm literally safe here, you know, on both sides, right? So that's something that I constantly try to, you know, say like, yeah, it's safe to come here.
Right.
Yeah. And it's also safe for me to go and push myself to say that I have a right to go and explore art in Chesterfield. I'm gonna come visit you. You know, the other piece in terms of risk is an emotional risk, I think, is very intimate. Something I've been pushing myself to say, and I listen for this, is when people say these kids. This is a lot of community art stuff where it's like these kids. And pushing myself to say, you know, instead of the community, or to say our kids, our community. And whether or not you work there or live there, but there's a very deep sense of commitment and risk that if the kids don't complete the art program, these kids couldn't get it together and da-da-da-da. No, if my son wasn't going to the art program, we would be having a little talk with daddy, right? You know, we would go the extra mile and go into these other places that it's beyond. I mean, again, to get back to process, and the point of the public art and all that is cultivating a lot more. So it's one of my little things that I'm starting to pick up on.
Gallery 210 is a similar problem of people not wanting to come up to Gallery 210. Nobody wants to cross Del Mar. And then the communities that surround UMSL and don't feel welcome on campus. The university has, and I think this is true of most universities, have set up a kind of a very insular and hermetic society. And what I have to do, and what I try to do, is make Gallery 210 as welcoming as possible by making certain things convenient. Easy parking, easy drop-off, accessibility, good hours, and programming that people can relate to. And I do that by building a board. If you have a good community board and you can talk to those people, and I truly represent your community, and they are your feelers out there, they can help guide you to say, yeah, we've done that, but let's do something that's really going to speak to this particular issue or this particular project, because that's really meaningful to the people now. And I think that is, and also I think if you feel like you need to go somewhere, you need to have the courage, like you, go to Chesterfield and invest yourself in those places.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
I'll go with you.
We'll get a shuttle and all go together.
It's weird because, you know, and I'm just fessing up here. You know, oftentimes we do like talk about, you know, people in the suburbs not coming into the city. But I am confessing to you all that I am scared of the suburbs. And so for me to be able to like think about, like, I want to see that giant statue in Chesterfield.
I'll take you
and
on a
I'm
tour
like,
then.
it's in Chesterfield though. But I'll go with you.
Yeah, and I think this brings up a point that Terry and Amanda especially have started to touch on. Like, what are these barriers, perceived or real, that prevent people from going to other communities or neighborhoods, or prevent somebody from going to the St. Louis Art Museum or the Pulitzer to experience art? Like, what are those perceived or real barriers? You touched on a little bit, like universities create insular.
I was going to say there's a sense of exclusivity with certain institutions. And I love the St. Louis Art Museum, I really do. But for many people, and it's not people from the city, people from the rural communities, they feel that this is not for them. And it's probably the architecture, maybe the didactic panels, maybe the uniforms, but they don't feel comfortable there. And then in some instances, like, people think the UMSL campus is unsafe. They're afraid they're going to be assaulted up there. And then there's just, I don't know, laziness. The problem of driving across county seems to be more trouble than it's worth. These are people who have never, ever driven around Chicago. Ever. We're getting across Chicago is, you know, you pack a lunch.
Well, and transportation is a real
It
issue
is.
for some people. Like, how will somebody from the city get to Chesterfield to see art if they don't have a car?
Exactly.
Right.
Anyone else?
Could I just touch on one thing that we were talking about before? I know that there are so many challenges with public art, but I also want to tell you that it's a privilege. There are so many countries in the world that people are not allowed to express their art. Their communities are not allowed to come together and create something. So it doesn't matter if it's in Chesterfield or Soulard, or go, experience the art, be outdoors, go to the art museum. It is not available for 90% of the world. So I know that there are challenges, but it's a privilege to be able to experience these things. I just wanted to make sure.
I don't think we think about that very
Yeah,
much.
exactly.
Are there any questions so far or comments? We've got two. Take this gentleman right by the rail.
Well, I just had two thoughts that
What's
relate
your
to
name?
Dave Koblitz.
Hi.
I'm from Chesterfield, and I have two thoughts that relate to what you were just talking about. When I tell people who are Creve Coeur or East that I live in Chesterfield, they get this look in their eye like, well, if I were to go there, would I have to go to the provision store and get a Conestoga wagon? I mean, that is literally how they act when you mention Chesterfield. It's, oh, it's so far out. It's only 5 miles from where they are, but it's like, in their mind, it's forever away. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of what art can do for a community that's a little different angle from what's been discussed is, I'm on the planning committee for the Wildwood Art Fair the last couple of years, and I instituted a plein air event as a lead into that. And my thought there was to organize the plein air event in such a way that the people were painting things in Wildwood that the residents of Wildwood could relate to, and then show those things at the art fair 2 months later. And also they were shown in City Hall for the intervening period. So the plein air was in June, the art fair was in August. What I noticed happening was it brought a lot of people to Wildwood who would never otherwise have been there and may have had some impression of Wildwood as the Far West again. And they learned a little bit about what the community was about by participating as artists. And I have a feeling that that propagates out from there like ripples on a pond to other people. So in some ways, bringing the arts to a community can bring artists to that community who can make art that's germane to that community, and then that can then draw other people from other communities to come find out what's there.
Thank you. And then there's a gentleman back there. Thank you.
So, two comments about things that I'm doing or have done that involve basically everything that you guys have mentioned. My name is Zach Smithy, and I'm a local professional artist. I'm a builder, a creator, a restaurant owner. I try to support local businesses, support charities, and since 2009, I have raised over $250,000 for various charities, nonprofits, by selling my artwork at various events. The last 2 years, I've done, I don't know if anybody's heard of the Easter Art Hunt. This last year, I spent 5 months every single day, 12 hours a day, making 1,000 pieces of art. And each one is original. And talking about involvement, people being able to follow along, participate. So people followed along on my Facebook page as I made them on a daily basis. And I would post updates on every single piece I made for the 5 months. And then at the end of the 5 months, for the 8 days preceding Easter, I gave all the pieces away, all over St. Louis, almost all the neighborhoods. Some of them I hid just in parks, and as I would hide them, I'd take pictures of them, post them live to Facebook, and people would follow along. First one to get there gets it. To support locally owned businesses, I would hide them at businesses. Nobody got advance notice that I was coming. So I just show up, tell them what I was doing, give them a few pieces of art, take a picture of them, post it, and be gone. And then people would rush there to get the art. But if it was at a locally owned business, they would have to purchase something, patronize the place, be involved. People were so happy that they got to discover so much about the entire city, go to places that they never would have gone before. And the last 2 years, the Easter Art Hunt has raised over $30,000 for various charities. I don't like applying for grants. I just like to work harder and sponsor it myself. I don't like wasting time only for the money to go somewhere else. You know, I just want to do it myself and get it over with. But it was a performance piece for me. It was all about the process. Just think about making 7 pieces of art in a single day, each one original, and try to make them quality, and then do that for 142 days. Yes?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Just a quick, I just wanted to actually respond to that. I think that's a really interesting concept of having a person or even a group of people or artists putting art around the city and having people explore. It's a really great way. I mean, that's a very cool project. I might wonder, you don't have to respond, but this is just something to think about, to get other artists involved with something like that, especially if you're not selling them, because it seems like a really great way to build a community around you and to help build support around the neighborhoods and businesses that you're also trying to promote and support. Yeah. So, yeah, that way you don't have to make 1,000 of them yourself.
Right.
But there's...
I just wanted to say the reason why I started it was a reaction to what happened in Ferguson, and it wasn't, I felt personally, it wasn't my place to inject my opinion into the matter. I just wanted to do something positive for the community and bring people together.
Great.
And people of all races, ages, genders have participated. Like thousands of people followed each year.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Fun.
And then D, and then you had your hand raised, and then there is, and then we'll get to you. Yeah. And then Richard.
Hey, my name is Dee Nichols, and my question actually regards like the vocabulary. For the panelists, do you see public art as like synonymous with community art? And if so, why? If not, how do you define the two?
I was going to say public art, I think, has a different kind of sponsor base. And I think community art is
Kind of
much more what these folks are doing up here in cultivating and building communities to create works of art, either permanent or temporary experiences. Public art, for me, addresses largely geographic or institutional aims and desires. Often public art is about political will to organize and put something out there, and it's that kind of a statement. Not in every instance, but I would say much of the public art, like the Arch, that's about the will of St. Louis to put together a great monument and then to talk about what a great city we are. And I think corporations do this with their plazas. Universities do this on their campuses. It's a way of branding themselves in a certain way. And a very limited number of people actually get to make those decisions. There is some public input, but not to the extent that this community activity takes place. This is ground up in the investment in terms of time and treasure. It is very different. So there's a difference between the two in my mind.
I mean, I would agree that there's a difference between the two, but I also am striving for the day when that line is erased. Because I think that the best public art is generated from the community, but I think that we're not there yet in terms of trying to like merge those ideas. I mean, we're starting to work towards that. But wouldn't it be amazing to someday have a public art sculpture that was created by the community?
Well, I think that's coming, and because the fact that social practice as a discipline is being taught in the universities now, there's a philosophical and methodological groundwork being laid that there's going to be a generation of artists coming up who will be able to apply those lessons and those activities to realizing that. But right now, it's pretty aspirational.
You had a question?
Thank you. My question really has to do with, as far as getting communities to become involved in these art projects or community art or public art, is about intentionality and how direct is your ask? Is it just that you show up and it's there? Or are you going out and knocking doors or to each person saying, hi, I invite you to participate in this event. I went to Jessica's event this past weekend, and it was that direct. Hi, please participate if you like to. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy this. So I'm just curious, what is y'all's take on this?
Well, that's definitely what I've been trying to do, in my work, not necessarily going out and knocking on everyone's door, but going out to all of the local arts organizations and saying, hey, this is your space. What would you like to do with it? Which people are very pleasantly surprised to hear, in most cases anyway. I can't necessarily pay them to do things there, but it's a start anyway. So yeah, I have found everyone is very open to that, and you're right. It just takes a simple ask to at least get the process started and get people thinking about it.
I can speak to what I do. I try to do it in 3 different levels. One is I'm approaching artists all over, regional artists, artists from Missouri, or even national artists to come in, participate. The second thing is I try to, like you said, talk to art organizations and see how can we partner, what can we do that will benefit both of us. One of the simplest things is we have a rotating art exhibit in the city hall, and we have about 5 artists who display their artwork every time. So I make it a point to tell all the artists, wherever you have your artwork, if it's a different gallery, no matter where in St. Louis, or even outside, bring those brochures and we will put it out here. So when people come in to see the artwork, I tell them, you want to see more of this artist's artwork, go to these galleries. It's just a simple way of involving the other art organizations. The third thing is to talk to the public, the community. So the community can either volunteer. Again, as a volunteer, you can, once you participate in the art activity, you get a voice. You say, you know what, maybe let's do it like this next time. I would have liked this better, or this is something I really like. And we also want to put together an art council. That is more of the leadership role that we talked about, and people who want to take, they want to be involved in what's going on in the community and make those decisions. So we ask people to be part of an art council. So those are some of the ways we approach the community and the artists.
I just wanted to chime in on this, and I think it goes back to Dee's question about public art and community arts is about, and I think it was a phrase that I learned through RAC, was access to high quality artists or art making. And I think that is where there's a line between like folk arts and high art, and is this quality? And when I've tried to have citizen panels to look at and to review, we're gonna have an installation for the Dutchtown intersection mural project that we did. We're reviewing their CVs and everything and looking at like what resonates with people to say that, oh, this is, aesthetically, very interesting, blah, 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 versus like, I like this, and being able to say, you know what, this is what the community wanted, and who am I to push a particular agenda or form or style. The other piece that and I know we didn't really talk about it in terms of architecture as a form of art and placemaking is so much about, again, these visuals that will indicate if you've got this, very, aesthetically a piece that doesn't, whether it's a building or a sculpture or a mural or something that doesn't resonate with the community, that's like, this this is not for me. So or I shouldn't be here. So that it can get, you can get those signals in so many different ways.
I think, oh, go ahead. And then we'll get you back.
Thank you. My name is Richard Riley. And then, not so much to pick on Chesterfield, but Chesterfield's here and an example, I guess. When I think of a lot of this stuff, so this is a brief statement, and you guys can discuss it if you think it's worth discussing. In the city of Chesterfield, there's a 30% population increase every day. Only 5% of the whole landmass of Chesterfield is zoned for multifamily housing. They've rejected Habitat for Humanity and any kind of workforce housing out there. And it's a big site of low-wage employment, which makes it an unsustainable development pattern because people can't afford where they live where they work. That's why the population out there is growing by 30%, because low-wage workers now have to travel more to and from work, which has a negative impact on the region's carbon footprint as well. So that exclusionary zoning, et cetera, seems to be screaming for artivism in some way, shape, or form to address some of the regional problems that we have. And I don't think that Chesterfield's the only place where that kind of activity might, occur. But when we're talking about geographies, we're also talking about political, geopolitical things, and certainly not every artist has the same point of view about the politics of, say, the various municipalities in the region.
If anybody wants to comment.
Because we only got, are we till 8?
No, we've got time.
Okay, because, I know we're going there, but I feel like this relates a lot with, you said about the geopolitical aspects, and we were I think hopefully we'll get a little bit more into gentrification, but this is about the production of space and who is it for, and real estate is real, and, an artist activist from the Bronx was one of my first teachers in community arts, said, gentrification is just another process in colonization. Blew my mind. I know what she was talking about. But when I think about, I'm trying to, really unpack what that looks like in terms of a historical lineage of the displacement and moving of bodies and exclusion, especially for African American communities to be displaced, for urban renewal, to whether that's done through a very formal, structured, chapter, blah, 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 9, whatever, to rezone something, or, if it's just the way the market, is working, the aesthetics involved in that are so critical. It's like you said, when you said you went to Kansas City and you didn't realize, from the cookie cutter and box, but there's also that flip side now, and I'm born and raised in New York City, is, the creation of urban, hip, vibrant districts and the, reshaping of places that were seen as, oh, it's vacant. There's nothing there. There's no culture. There's no, and I can come in and remake this space. Who has the power to remake and the resource and
who defines what's there,
right,
or doesn't exist, or actually not exist.
Right.
Also, make sure if you have a question, put that hand up real high, because I might just be looking out of my peripheral vision.
Can I ask more than one?
I'll think about it. If it's really good, you can raise your hand again. Okay, just kidding. Go ahead. Hi.
Hi, I'm Lara, and this is an amazing panel, and I've learned so much. And I take public transportation every day, train, bus, or bicycle, and I am noticing so much public artwork, especially in the train tunnels with Metrolink. And I'm just curious. I feel like people miss public art, or they don't see it because of other modes of transportation. And I was just wondering if you guys have come to problems with this, with public art, and if there's solutions to gain more people to view and notice public art.
Self-driving cars. Then they can look all they want. But till we have that, I prefer they not look around a whole lot.
Anyone?
Yeah, I was going to say, of course, Great Rivers Greenway, before we got into the creative placemaking of the riverfront business, we make bike paths and trails and greenways. And so in some ways, what I'm trying to do is an extension of that philosophy of connecting people in that way on a much more human scale. But I'm really proud of what we've done so far as creating that network of trails and ways that we can pass through communities and not really be able to ignore them the way we can if we're in the car. So we've definitely, and just talking beforehand, exploring ways to get more public art out into those spaces where you are traveling at a scale at which you can actually notice things for a change. So
I just wanted to chime because it made me think about when I went to visit in Cuba. One of the things that stuck out, and we talked about sharing outside of St. Louis, was they really, in terms of billboards, there weren't paid advertisement. All the billboards were sort of a cross between public art and PSAs, like campaigns about save energy, and it'd be something with a light bulb and a bunch of little ants or something really cute like that. And I'm just like, okay, so as much as we maybe have movement for tactical urbanism, we need tactical suburbanism. Let's go and take over billboards or strip malls or boring places, I don't know, and put something surprising there that will wake people up to think a little bit differently. But I loved driving in Cuba and only seeing art on billboards. It was wonderful.
I think the issue is, of course, it's the highway system. It's built for efficiency. It's not built for meandering. The only way to change it is to close down highways and force people through areas where there is artwork, which is probably not going to happen. But once you started making efficient travel your priority, it's very hard to. You can make the landscape as beautiful as you want. You can make some beautiful overpasses, but that's really going to make it hard to incorporate really beautiful art into the driving experience.
I actually wanted to say something just about the.
What's your name?
Sorry, I'm Jess Witte. I did see the change this weekend, and I'm a little exhausted, so hopefully this is coherent. But I also am the chair of the Creve Coeur Arts Committee, or Arts Committee. Sorry, we changed our name. But and our big problem is our community is Olive Street Road to the north, and we're trying to make a downtown, but it's really it's commercial, and then it's lots of big houses, and people don't get out of their cars. So we've worked to do artist design bus shelters, and just trying to figure out a way to slow people down enough. Hopefully the millennial, is that the right thing? Centennial Greenway, finally gets finished and people can slow down. But it's amazing the shift between making pedestrian spaces and trying to get people to gather literally, and how we're trying to work to make a downtown when initially that's, this isn't gonna make sense.
I wanted to ask about the Crestwood Mall.
Oh, this is Creve Coeur.
Oh, Creve Coeur. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Never mind.
No, not right now. Hold on. We've got a woman back there, and then a woman in the green shirt, and then D. And then we're going to move on to our next section. Go ahead.
My name is Elaine, and you've discussed community art and or versus public art, and given where we are now, and the focus that is on racial equity, for example. If we look around the room, I don't know whether this is representative of what St. Louis as a region looks like. I've only been here for a couple of years, but how do each of you see public art and or community art advancing racial equity, particularly after the release of the Ferguson Commission report?
maybe I could touch on that subject a little bit.
'Cause that's a really big topic.
Yeah.
It's kind of related, kind of not, but we'll leave a little room here for you guys to chat about it.
Right. Right. So there are two things that I can think of that are in the periphery of what we're doing. One is, after I started working in Chesterfield, one of the things that I wanted to do was see how the population was divided. And I was very, very surprised to see that there is a huge number of Asian American population in Chesterfield. There are people from South Asia, there are people from Thailand and China and Vietnam. And I wanted to see if we could have these immigrant communities also have a voice in our public art. My idea has been to reach out to different communities through schools, through their, places where they worship or places where they gather, community areas, to see if they would volunteer for our projects, if they have artists within those communities who would like to participate with us. Again, be part of our arts council. Those are some of the things that we're trying to do to integrate the community. And like you said, it's a newer community, it's a growing community, and it's a community, like you said, that they want to have their stories heard. They don't see any of themselves in St. Louis. It's very hard to get, when you talk about an immigrant population, there is a huge immigrant population that's not represented. And so they want to get their voices heard. That's one. The other geographical, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a group of cities and municipalities and communities in and around St. Louis. And this is open to everybody. So we're trying to get all municipalities together. The idea came from our parks director, who said that when people build rec centers and parks in different parts of the town, they would have all the municipalities like Manchester and Creve Coeur and Chesterfield, all of them would just meet and exchange ideas. And this is everybody, all over St. Louis, St. Charles, everybody. So we wanted to have the same kind of collaboration with the arts. And that's something that's very new, and we are going to have our first meeting in June. And it's a geographical collaboration. How do different municipalities deal with their ideas? What are their challenges? And like you said, everything is a political system, but it's a different political system. Some municipalities are staff-driven, some of them are volunteer-driven. But all of the ideas are to create a place where their communities can come and have a good time, create art, enjoy themselves. So those are two of the things those are some things that we're trying to do to address the geography of the community. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I think it actually touched, I'm glad you said that because it touched on a question that I wanted to ask all of you anyway, which was how can we encourage artful collaborations between neighborhoods or communities or between the city and the county? And what does that look like? And what are some challenges? And you mentioned one area in which it's already happening. So does anyone else have an example of something like that, or how we might facilitate those types of endeavors?
Well, the artists are actually in the preliminary stages of working with Mike Brown Sr., Chosen for Change, and the Truth Telling Project to create a project that is created by the community. And kind of what we're thinking about doing is doing pop-up art spaces throughout the region under a similar banner or theme, so that people will be able to make art, in theory, like collaborate together, and then see how that collaboration comes together and see both similarities and differences. And so we're gonna start doing that throughout the summer with the exhibit being for the anniversary weekend. And we're sort of looking at like strengths and struggles within communities, and what does that look like? And so we're having a brainstorming session on Sunday. It's still being defined.
And that's interesting because a lot of times when you do things like this, you can see that, oh, our struggle isn't so different from this other community or this other group of people, or our differences are actually something to be celebrated. And as cliche as that is and sounds, people don't understand that at a really internal, deep level. Like, you might speak differently, or your neighborhood has totally different architecture or a different artistic vibe. That's okay. It's great. That's why we have different arts. Go ahead, Amanda.
I just feel like a really basic thing is exposure in that sense, and invitation for artists, one from within their own community, to get paid opportunities to do paid opportunities to do, you know, and to exhibit and to build and to share their work. But like also having artists from different places, you know, be invited to present and to exhibit in other places. I mean, that's
a really simple thing.
It's really simple, but we kind of have to do a little bit of extra work, I think, to pull in and go across and to find artists who I mean, it's like, how can you reach out for artists you don't know because you don't know them, but then you have to do that extra work to try to find a set of artists that you don't know.
And I also think that one of the things that's really, really important is that there is a hierarchy in art that needs to be dismantled. And, you know, we have people who go to Washington University and get art degrees, and I'm not knocking that by any means. But we also have people in communities that didn't have that art opportunity, that are equally talented and have the same, you know, they're artists in their, you know, in their heart and soul, and they may not have the pedigree or the credentials, but we need to invite them into our midst. And, you know, I've met people in the neighborhood who are amazing artists. And it's like, how do we cultivate that? And not only cultivate that, but give them equal access. Because when we do, that's what's going to create space and geography in a way that is fair and just and also beautiful.
I do think a big part of it to achieve this is networking. There are organizations like Critical Mass that provide forums and gathering places for the exchange of ideas. And I think it's every person up here, if you have a chance, volunteer and serve on different panels, different review boards, and I think we all need to be more inclusive than we are sometimes. Sometimes we get so busy, but I feel that I'm putting together an exhibition called Taking It to the Streets, and it's going to be an exhibit of social justice, dealing with artists who live primarily in North County. And I thought I knew a lot of the artists in North County until I asked Frida Wheaton for her list. And then I asked Mel Watkins for her list. And then Roseanne Weiss gave me her list. And the list of what I had was 30 people, moved to 70 real fast. And I say that kind of networking is essential. And then you build these databases. And now you have something that we can all share. And then we can then trade back and forth. I want to advocate for Critical Mass as being a great fulcrum for getting that done for us.
All right, and then the woman in the green shirt, and then D.
I guess I kind of want to piggyback on Laura over here. My name is Rebecca Eilering, and I'm an artist, designer. I do a lot of different things. I'm a not tree hugger, but a building hugger. But I guess what I want to, I'm a tree hugger too. But I guess the first thing I want to say is, as a person coming from a completely different planet, I live over in Illinois.
Woo,
and
that's my home state.
So
and
sorry.
it's even harder for people to get over there than it is for people to get out to Chesterfield, but I digress. I guess one thing that I've noticed while riding my bike around through the city, and it's been like this kind of thing that I kind of put myself to do, is to bike through every single neighborhood in St. Louis City. And one thing that I noticed probably the most that kind of sticks in my mind is a lot of the public art and a lot of the architecture and, you know, I guess the public art is like, or not public art, but community art like landscape kind of gardens and things like that, the things that people in those communities put together. Those are the things that I kind of recognize the most, and those are the things that I've noticed that kind of separate, that give each neighborhood kind of a different identity. And that's something that if I wasn't doing that, I probably would have never seen it, and I probably would have never have, there's definitely a different mindset now that I have toward specific areas, specifically North City, which is not just one thing, it's many different neighborhoods that are unique. And I guess I don't want to take up too much time, but I've biked through Old North St. Louis probably 1,000 times, and over each time I've met people, and I talk to people in the community, and they recognize me now, which is funny because it's like I don't live there, but that's what cycling has done, and my interest in art and all these things. So now it's like I go to art openings in Old North St. Louis, which are very, the artwork there is very specific to that neighborhood, and it's very different than, art exhibits that you find like on Cherokee Street or like in the Central West End art museums and stuff like that. And I find that just invigorating and very inspiring.
Thank you. Dee, you had a question, and then MK, and then I'm going to switch subjects a little bit.
Yeah, so my question kind of transitions from the last part of your statements, but also back to some earlier statements that Amanda was making about gentrification and the arts. I was wondering if the panelists could dive more deeply into gentrification and revitalization and placemaking versus placekeeping, in the sense of answering the question, do having the arts in a community, in a neighborhood, fuel or lead towards gentrification? And I think specifically about Cherokee Street and Old North, and now
that's our next session.
Yeah, the loop in all of these areas that are undergoing change, and there's like that push and pull between the people who live there and the art that's being made, and like how vibrant, and especially in like an area like Cherokee, how it's so relevant that like everybody wants to go there, but how does that affect the places where you all are and places like those neighborhoods?
Yeah, that is the next section that we're going to be going into. I just want to make sure I get any other questions that are related to info.
Hi, I'm MK Stallings. I was thinking about something. I drive to the north side, particularly towards downtown with Old North, all the time, and I'm always struck by graffiti. And I wonder if anybody can take it up, but what role does graffiti play in our ideas about community art?
We talked about this earlier.
Excellent question.
Well, before we really started talking in public. Go ahead. Anybody, take it away.
Amanda, you look like
I was just laughing because I don't know the whole backstory right now, but there's a semi-graffiti war going on right now on South Grand. Do y'all know about this?
No.
Yeah. And I mean, this is just a really interesting thing about, I guess, when it's illegal, when it's beautiful, when it's not, when there's like, an intention to agitate versus to, maybe pacify or to kumbaya up or I don't know what. It makes me think about, some other murals that we've had that, maybe skew a little bit more towards graffiti style, and that, some of the elders in the community are like, no, get that out of here. That's where you start to get a little bit more into who is making, and I think that's so deeply tied to the gentrification. That whole piece is who gets to be called the artist and who's, you know, making trouble.
I mean, if it was Banksy doing it, it would be different, wouldn't it?
For those who know who that is, right?
Yeah,
All right.
I just wanted to mention that one of my things this year is working with the Paint Lewis event down on the flood wall, which has already been interesting. And so, you know, there's so much incredible talent there, and it's an event that draws people from around the country to our city. And yet there is still that edginess to it. So the challenge is, how do you preserve that edginess? And, you know, and just like any art, some of it is supposed to make you uncomfortable and make you think about things and face some realities that you may not want to. Others of it is just beautiful and feel good, and it's all valuable. But there's a component of that, you know, that involves the vandalism and the unsanctioned part of the event. So it's going to be a big challenge, and working closely with the organizers of that, it has opened my eyes to the whole world that goes on, you know, with the street art, and trying to make it something that is legitimate and valued and appreciated, and yet not, you know, completely neuter it, so that you preserve some of its vitality. So I'll report back on that next year. We'll see.
All right, I think this is a good time because it's been brought up. We are entering our the home stretch. Is that what it's called? Whatever. We're entering the last part of this talk, and we're going to devote it to gentrification and any other last topics that you might bring up. So in our pre-panel powwow, we kind of went over some of these questions and started talking about gentrification and basically like what does that mean? What is gentrification? And before I kind of go, I'm going to ask Amanda for you to give your definition that you gave. But when we kind of think about gentrification, we might see a surge in art. But with that, we might also see artists who were living there and practicing there driven out of areas that they can no longer afford to live and work in. So gentrification or the surge in art can include public art projects, private or public art galleries, and also performing art spaces. And when we think about the various areas in the region where this has happened or is happening, like Old North, Cherokee, Del Mar, Grand Center, the Central West End, there's a lot of areas where once it's been revitalized or whatever you would like to call it, arts have been a part of it somehow. I'd like for each of you to kind of talk about the dynamic that this gentrification, and I'll have Amanda define kind of like I think an interesting definition that this creates in the neighborhood or community, and specifically who creates art experiences and who are they created for? Also to think about, and this is for everyone, what happens when those who are not native to a community come to consume experiences or to participate art in a different community? We kind of talked about this earlier. What might be the benefits and what are some of the challenges? So economic benefits of the arts or downfalls if you're an artist who's been driven out. Things like parking. When you're coming to a community that's not yours to consume, whose parking spaces are you taking up? And how does that affect the community that exists there? And then one piece that I think is particularly interesting are interpersonal relationships and attitudes between natives of the communities that are there and those who are visiting, between arts programmers in the community that they're programming in, which they may or may not be a part of. That's a lot. I can repeat and hear all of it. Go.
Okay, so I borrowed this definition from Molly Metzger, who's a professor at WashU in the Brown School, and she credits it to someone else, is the gentrification as the production of space for progressively affluent users. And I think about that because when we first started talking was that, you know, sometimes artists, you know, maybe living within a community for a while and they feel that they're part of it. You know, they're not outsiders coming in. They've been here, you know, but in terms of the effects, and it's that intent versus impact, the impact of the type of arts that are being done in the space have effects on real estate and development. That's for me a big part of what I look at through my lens professionally. Especially when you're dealing with residential, commercial districts that are surrounded by residential that don't reflect then that consumer base or such as, it becomes exclusionary within someone's home, that they're feeling that this is within my own space is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll step back for a
I
second.
can only
I'll jump
speak
back
to
in.
experiencing gentrification. I lived in the U City Loop for, I want to say 7 or 8 years, and had to move out of 3 apartments because Washington University bought the building, until eventually we were priced out and couldn't live there and had to move further down Del Mar, and to watch how the neighborhood changed, to watch the things that drew me to the community but then suddenly weren't there. The drum circle that's now where there's a restaurant, and the chess tables that were there that are no longer there because somebody bought that whole thing, and to see the school that closed there because a lot of the residents that had children were priced out, and it closed the school down. Gentrification has real impact on people, and I think that the blind spot that it starts from is that people, it is colonization, because it's oh, look, we've discovered this really cool place. But whether you acknowledge it or not, communities exist, and there's vibrance and life there, whether you're acknowledging it or not. The community knows what's there. And so I guess my most eloquent statement is gentrification sucks.
Maybe I'd like to look at it from a different point of view. You brought up colonialism, and I grew up in a country which was colonized for many, many years. My grandfather was born and lived at a time when the British still ruled India. And so I do see how when it was not really community, an army came in and took over a country and said, this is our country. And I still see it as cultural misappropriation sometimes. And it's a very difficult topic for me, because sometimes it's not okay and sometimes it's okay. You're talking about when somebody comes in and takes up the space, and I'm talking about when someone comes and takes the culture of a space, of a country, of a community. It is the respect that's the underlying factor. If there is respect and if there's honor, then it is okay. It is okay to understand and learn about, but it's not okay to commercialize it. It's not okay to make a culture a fad. And I don't know if this really works with gentrification. You know what I mean? If I'm just trying to look at it from a different angle, but that's.
I think that you're seeing that happen a lot in Oakland. The very, very raucous debates in these communities where, that kind of centered around, I think it was a Trader Joe's, because there was already a grocery store there. But it wasn't the grocery store that the people that had moved into the neighborhood suddenly wanted that, because the store that had been there, that it had a lot of foreign food, I think somebody said, is a reflection of that. It's they come into the community, people come into the community and see the value of it, but then immediately try to insert their own values over those of the people that have lived there and have existed there. And I think that that's where the problem lies.
Matt, did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to mention it. I've always kind of had mixed feelings about the term creative placemaking, because it's as if there was not already a place there,
right.
So we need to be able to do this in a way that honors what is already there and what has been there. I think particularly, you know, the idea of the St. Louisans having this inferiority thing, I think is a little overblown, but, you know, because we need the perspective of people who have lived other places, but at the same time, I think we need to embrace what is really St. Louis and the grittiness and all that includes, and be proud of that and make that part of all these efforts.
So one thing I kind of think of sometimes is when you might have a new burgeoning or a community that might be in process of coming to a new period or a new era, that there's this bit of spectacle involved where there's kind of like when you're not of that place, you go and look and go, oh, look at this place. I'm so glad that someone's here trying to make it better. And it ends up really devaluing, like you all were saying, everything that existed before the other came in and decided to make it better or make it different than what it was, because it's better in whose eyes, right? Can some of you talk about maybe specific neighborhoods? And this is also for audience members that you might be a part of, and how you might see some of these relationships or tensions play out.
I just wanted to back up a second though, because I think there's still some people who want gentrification to happen. Like we've all talked about it, like, oh, it's a bad thing, but there's
It's not
people
always
who,
a bad thing.
but then people are like, yes, please gentrify my neighborhood. And I mean, that deals with property values, desirable people, undesirable people. I mean, the function that our housing markets are racist. I mean, they are. You know, the property value of a equally same features of a home, put a black family in it, put it in a black neighborhood, it's worth less. You know, it's just what it is. I don't know. I just want to make sure I want to throw it in there before we dig into the second part of it.
I think that there's a way, if we could do development for, marginalized communities in a way that is like you deserve a quality of life. You deserve beauty, you deserve art, you deserve parks that are safe and have interesting playground equipment. I think the problem comes is that oftentimes the investment occurs when somebody suddenly feels like they discovered it, and then suddenly it's like, oh, we're going to suddenly invest all these resources, when the resources should have been invested all along. Mm-hmm. And if they had been, we would have seen that there's a rich culture there. There are people there. There's a community there. It may not look like the community that you are expecting, but it is a community.
Well, you're talking about ethical leadership and development within certain communities, and this is a very rare bird to find anywhere. Because developers are not there to make your life better; they're there to make money. I mean, that's their only reason for going in and doing this work, to attract people who have money and can enrich themselves. That's the long and short of it.
And that's why land trusts are really important.
Indeed.
Because the community can then define for themselves what that investment looks like.
And again, it's local leadership. You need to have people in those communities who are willing to stand up to those interests.
But then to bring it back, I think a little bit with the way that artists who come into work into a community that is not their own, and they're attracted to the fact that it's more affordable or whatever. It's like, are artists taking the time and getting schooling themselves, educating themselves on development processes, to be more intentional. And that's not demanded of the artist. It's not the community's not demanding it. The artist's not demanding it of themselves. Developer sure isn't, like you said. They're like, go ahead, make that cool. Yes, we're gonna turn that into a really funky bar. So who makes the demand of the artists to be intentional about their practice? And you said that there's development within universities for social practice.
I was saying social practice. I said there's a generation coming up, and there were artists like a Sarah Paulson,
I love me some Sarah
I just saw her, and I mean, when you see what she's doing in her neighborhood, and these are little, I hate to say this, points of light that are really, but it's contagious, you know. It's like Gina Martinez's, another one, another little place, and you start bringing those people in, and it starts to grow. But you know, the thing is, it takes a while. You know, I'm not going to see this happen. You probably will. Our children, I think, most certainly will. It's just a long-term project that's turning this over very slowly.
Was there a question? We've got you, and then you, and then the gentleman right behind you, and then.
Okay, well, this has kind of already come up. The question I originally had, or comment I originally had was, I feel that everything that can happen, every place that can be, has its positive side and its negative side, and I think gentrification is the same. The plus side is, you look at a place like Cherokee. The artists moved there originally because the property values are low, and so they can afford to be there. Then they go do their thing, and they increase the property values. And all of a sudden, they can't afford to be there anymore. So that's both a positive and a negative. The other thing I wanted to mention is that if communities don't want some outsider to come in and develop them out of existence, then they need to take it upon themselves to foster the development among themselves, to fund it among themselves. And recognizing that a lot of these communities that we're talking about don't have a lot of money in that community, but still, if they care about staying a community, then maybe they need to tax themselves to fund development of their own community their own way.
All right, would anybody like to respond to that?
I think that that sounds lovely in theory, but it also requires resources. And oftentimes it comes down to access. And if you are in a poorer community that has suffered from disinvestment in the city, from the city, like the North Side, that telling people, oh, you need to organize and rally yourself, is difficult because you're also fighting a city entity who is not interested in investing in that community for a number of political, social, racial reasons.
I would just add on top of that, Elizabeth, is it's also, in terms of the housing disparities that exist in St. Louis, this is like decades of federal levels of investment and disinvestment. And so that in order to create the economic, I mean, when you talk about economic development and TIFs and all these other kinds of, you know, promise zones and some, like, you're gonna need major investment beyond, and I will say also, I mean, communities are also very, people bootstrapping every day, you know, finding ways to do, you know, collectives and corporate. So there are lots of movements, you know, very grassroots level to support economic development within, you know, crowdfunding for business development or for, you know, churches taking up money to help someone stabilize their home. There are a lot of things sort of happening in that way, but I mean, the level of, especially for like subsidizing mortgages, like FHA and things like, I mean, like that's massive amounts of investment that need to be done to redress some of the levels of disparity that we have in our region.
And to tell the neighborhoods that have been subjected to that, oh, well, you need to rally yourself up. I mean, the North Side, Paul McKee on the North Side bought hundreds of properties that he allowed to go into blight with the city's permission. And there were people for 10 years that were fighting that, but they didn't have a lot of power. And now, you know, we've got the NGA thing that's coming and everybody's saying, oh, jobs. But those jobs are coming off established neighborhoods that have endured a lot and have been fighting. I mean, there were people going on hunger strikes for their property. And, you know...
Sorry, I would just say, look up Richard Rothstein gave a keynote on the making of Ferguson, the Brown School. You can get it from their website and listen to his full keynote. And I mean, he just drops gems on gems on gems. And I mean, the scholarship and the research is there. So.
I mean, I would also just give a personal example. I live currently in the Grove. And even before we moved there, I used to live over by the Botanical Gardens. We just my husband and I spent like a day just like walking through the Grove and talking to neighbors. Like they saw us like looking at houses and they wave us down like, hey, you know, as they should, like, who are you? Walking down our street, staring at houses and empty buildings. And so we started talking to a lot of neighbors and they gave us the 411 on who owned all the property in the neighborhood. Wash you. And how, you know, and these are neighbors who were very informed, went to community meetings, went to neighborhood meetings, tried to fight against these large, extremely powerful institutions, and it is hard and sometimes nearly impossible. And in fact, except for a handful of people who own their homes, most of the land has already been, all the lots, vacant lots have been owned and bought up by WashU's real estate and have been, somebody had to contribute or submit RFPs, a request for proposals, and now it's all been given to one or two developers.
Which they pay no taxes on. That's an important thing.
Right, and then now you're gonna have property that may or may not be rental, that people may not be able to decide what kind of home they want built. There's all this other political and economic bureaucracy that people have to go through, folks who did try very hard to fight their community being taken from them. So I just want to put that people are out there fighting. And I went to some meetings, and I looked at the board of representatives who were there to represent my neighborhood, and they were not representative at all, at all. So, is that Paisha?
Yes.
Hi.
Yay. Okay, so of course I'm going to talk about Cherokee streets. Three things. So I think one thing, and in comparison to the Loop and to South Grand, I think a lot of times people forget that Cherokee is a street, right? And it's not a neighborhood.
Right.
And not only is it a street, but it's a street that divides 2 wards and 4 neighborhoods. And it has a business association and a nonprofit and 6 neighborhood associations surround it, and there's a SID that's forming, and so there's a whole bunch of other things that go on under the bump and hustle, you know? And I think people tend to forget that coming into a place that has, and then we can't forget all of the, I jokingly, but not jokingly, call them incestuous business relationships, because multiple people own multiple businesses or multiple buildings on the street too. And so that kind of steers the direction and sets the tone of how the quote unquote gentrification goes, how slowly or how under the rug it might be. I'm very careful when I use that term because I do live in one of the 4 neighborhoods, and it's probably some of the cheapest rent I've ever had for now, but I do think there is a sort of social gentrification, you know, that happens along that street, depending on the time of day, depending on what's happening. Because on Monday, when all the businesses are closed, the people who are on the street in the morning are taking the bus. And it's not, you know, they're not walking up to Cherokee to go to work, they're walking up to Cherokee to get on the bus to go to work somewhere else. And so any conversation that is had, I always have to ask, when we're talking about the community in Cherokee Street, what community are we talking about, right? Are we talking about the business owners who have their own community, or are we talking about the people who may not live in any of the neighborhoods but still come and contribute and positively do things and want to be part of that kind of community of the people? Or are we talking about just revelers, or are we talking about everybody and their mother who's running for an elected office right now? All of it comes into play when you're talking about community, depending on what you're talking about. And then there are the artists, you know, who some of my artist friends kind of feel like, you know, I have to do something. I have to earn my place to live here, right? I can't just come here and do art because then I'm part of that that system of whatever, of I'm starting the gentrification. And, you know, to be an artist, you're just an artist, you know? You don't have to have a punch card, okay, I went and worked with the kid, you know? But it becomes that because you have all these conversations about community, and it's like, well, what community do I fit into? And then, like, what do I have to do to, like, really be a part of that community? You know, and then does this community, like, not like this other community? And so it's a beautiful, my 3 things are in there somewhere. I had them bullet pointed in my head, I'm sorry. So talking about that specific particular place where I personally am at is trying to figure out what is the community that's most representative of everybody, right? I don't know what that is. So I gotta, you know, put my toe in a whole bunch of other things, and sometimes we cross and sometimes we overlap. And then what are the things that are the most effective at engaging the largest amount of people? And I don't know what that is either. And I guess I'll end with this point. The thing that saddens me about that is I don't know if we're even collectively trying to figure that out. And I don't know if you guys that have experience over there could speak to that, to specifically Cherokee.
Sorry, Paige. I want to jump into this because I can say in terms of the work that I do through Dutchtown South Community Corporation, historic Dutchtown include Gravois Park, which goes up to Cherokee on the southern side. I mean, I want to say engagement for what? You know, engage just to feel good. I'm very sensitive to economic development, and to look at the demographics of Gravois Park, the rate of poverty is very high. And so if there's going to be economic development and activity, whether it's stimulated by the arts or any other type of thing, and people are making money and prospering, I want to make sure that the neighborhood is prospering just as much as the business district is. And so that's like a very high priority for me, and whether or not that relates to our more narrow role with housing stabilization, that, you know, the rents and the landlords are held accountable and that the rent is stabilized in a certain sense, but home ownership value or home ownership opportunities are marketed for the residents who currently live there, rather than trying to, you know, attract. I mean, there's vacancy, and so there's room for some more people, but Gravois Park is the most dense neighborhood in the city of St. Louis. Dutchtown is the most populated neighborhood in the city of St. Louis. So do we really need more people? I mean, come if you want. It's great. I know you want to be there. But I also want to make sure the families and the people that are there, this is an economic development question that really right now most of the tools and mechanisms, whether it's driven by arts or something else, they're not, most people I talk to don't really have a model for how this would be for the residents who are currently living there.
I was wondering if Brett would like to make some comments about Cherokee Street, since he's one of the artists who lives and works down there.
Yeah, I just, no matter anywhere I've ever lived, I just always wanted to live in a neighborhood that was interesting, that had affordable housing, and that always was a neighborhood that was on the decline, or close to an L stop, or something that had some interest to me. And I would have loved to stayed in any of those neighborhoods if, as it got gentrified and the rents went up or the housing prices went up, if there was a community that supported my career as an artist. So then artists could stay there, afford to, as the neighborhood got more prosperous. But my comment, I guess, would be to the panel and anybody else who would like to comment on it is, we talk about not gentrifying neighborhoods, but if the only people that are allowed to live in the neighborhood is people that have lived there 20 years or more, what happens to that neighborhood when those people that have lived there for a long time pass away and no one is there to replace that? So sometimes I think gentrification can be looked at in different ways. If a neighborhood becomes so insular that nobody can live there except for people that live there, then it becomes an island. And you have all these neighborhoods that are islands throughout a whole city, and what does that do to a city? And I think the answer is, if you look at what has happened to St. Louis County, where the municipalities become their own little city-states, where it is controlled by the certain government entities and laws and things like that, we get these municipalities become islands, and with those islands we get other problems. So, gentrification is a problem, but do we want our neighborhoods to become islands that only 20 or 30-year residents have to live there and nobody else can move there?
I don't think that we want them to become islands. We want them to be accessible to people at all income levels, and to have people at all income levels have an equal stake and an equal voice in the construction and visioning of those communities. And, you absolutely need like young people coming in, but what would be ideal would be young people who maybe grew up in that neighborhood not having to leave that neighborhood because there's no opportunities, because there's no housing, because there's boarded up buildings, but rather would come back to be in the community because it is vibrant and it is accessible.
Yeah, I would just to speak on the history of in Cherokee and Southside, and I'm new to St. Louis and learning about it, but I don't know, she probably wouldn't like me calling her an elder, but I'll call her an elder. Tell me that, at one point, black folk couldn't really go south of Arsenal. She was like, yeah, no, we didn't go down there, And now, in terms of the Benton Park West, Gravois Park area, heavily African American, but how did that community get there when that wasn't, in terms of that 20, 30, 50, this is not the same story as if we're talking about Webster or some other neighborhood or municipality. So I would say specifically for Gravois Park, Benton Park West, and Dutchtown, that another colleague in the city in the Civil Rights Enforcement Office, in terms of tenant rights, said that the housing stock that's there, it's like 60 to 70% rental. It's owned by folks who live out in the county or even out of state. Some of it's been bought up, by private developers, and then they're, basically kind of running them at slum level condition. Is that residents to some degree maybe were given signals that this was a temporary stop. This was not your neighborhood to really have a decision to decide to invest in and to stay and to be here. And when you have to make sure this is connected to our theme around art, when you have arts as a part of the neighborhood cycle of a neighborhood in decline, as you mentioned, and now there's a chance for profit as the neighborhood is revitalizing, there's whole segments of community that were those low-income placeholders, so to speak, until now, my property, I can reinvest in it but they're not the owners, they're tenants. And so that's a very tricky relationship for me, I would say, in terms of community development, to ask people to invest in their neighborhood, and then financially in some way, how can they, if they're not the owners, to actually, have any rights to the building. So as people are coming in and flipping things and whatnot, to say, let's, work on credit repair and all these other things to be able to buy homes and stay in the neighborhood. But I would say from the side of the silent investors, the silent community members who are not there, but they also have a stake, there's, to me, it's a little bit of a dirty game going on with waiting for the neighborhood to be hot and artistic enough for it to revitalize.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more hands. Okay, so the woman in white, I want to go to somebody who hasn't talked. In panel, first, if it's a comment, please keep it brief, especially if you've already talked. If it's a question, please ask it
quickly so that if the panel wants to respond, they can. Okay? All right.
No. Hi, I'm Kathy, and I work at Art St. Louis, and we're downtown, so it doesn't have the neighborhood kind of feel that a lot of you deal with, but it is. I mean, there is a downtown residential neighborhood for sure. So I'd like to talk to you, ask you for your considerations on how to respect the neighborhood. Not necessarily where we're at right now. We've got a good. I think we're working on fitting in, getting a good feel for where we are. But we're looking at opening a second location and in a different neighborhood. And I want to be really sensitive to where we're going and what fits there. We can't take the business model we have and drop it in somewhere else. We talked to someone in the Cherokee neighborhood, Cherokee Street is not a neighborhood, sorry, in Cherokee that had the similar opened art gallery there and realized it's not a good place for an art gallery with white walls and a very formal feel. You gotta respect what's there. So we certainly don't want to be somewhere we're not welcome. We want to bring art to people who would appreciate it and not say, what the hell are you doing in my neighborhood? This is for people like me. So how do, getting back to more of the art side, and we've been talking about real estate and stuff, which is very interesting, but how does an arts organization respect the neighborhood and bring something to the neighborhood that benefits the people who are already there, not just bringing in tourists, bringing in, we don't need another place that the people from the county go look at, and isn't that cool, and then they go back home.
Thank you.
So what do you think?
Yeah, if I'd like to respond. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but
I'd say make it about the neighborhood. Go there, talk to those people, and find out who they are and what they want. They will tell you what they want. The neighborhood will offer you guidance. Every neighborhood has leaders, and there's artists in every neighborhood, and they will give you the guidance you need if you will listen.
And wouldn't it be interesting if you collaborated with a church or someplace that was already there and established and, set up there as a way so that it's on the natural pathways where people go. And it feels like it's part of the community because it's in collaboration with people who are in that community. Instead of trying to buy up a new building and start there and see what happens and develop those relationships first and then kind of branch out.
And also, just let me say this, that too, when you're going to another community, not to hold so fast to your own ideas and goals, because you might find that in collaborating and utilizing many of the rich resources that already exist, that together you come up with something even better or wilder and more wonderful than what you plan to take to a community in the first place.
Okay, I'm going to hijack the mic for a second. I have a question. So I'm struck by this sense that art is kind of a dual sort of thing. So on the one hand, you have art as commodity, and on the other hand, you have art as tool for social change and all these other sort of things. I guess what I'm sort of wondering is, how do our ideas about what art is affect the potential for art as a transformative force? So if art's a commodity, then how does it challenge hegemonic norms? And if art is, a tool for social change, how does it sustain the artist? I just would like to get your guys sort of, let's say, pithy ideas about that.
2 minutes, go.
I wanted to hear more about what Sukanya was saying about each place having an art sort of
its own
motif or a zone, or this is what this place makes.
You mean the personality?
Yeah, because I think that is something that in terms of learning about St. Louis and this, I'm still trying to feel this out in terms of comparing to other places or feeling a little bit of what's the phrase you used? Yeah, that like I'm just amazed by some like the architectural history and some of these things that are like maybe like somewhat functional but not, but they're like amazing legacies. The park legacy of St. Louis, these like mini parks everywhere. It's like there are these things that could be, I think, muses even for creating something that's very specific that can be celebrated. So I don't know if you want to share more about that. I wanted to hear about that.
I think this is a very, very big question. I don't have all the answers, but one of the things that I want to do in my life is not look at art as a product. Yes. Look at art as how you live your life. You know, a lot of the things that I like to do will revitalize my home and my family, and I hope it grows to the community. Like I want to grow my own food. You know, I want to, small things like that, things that have a social significance. I would like to have solar panels on my roof, you know, or whatever I'm learning. Again, this is something that I'm constantly reading about, constantly trying to get better at, trying to make friends with people who don't look like me. And I just want to live a life. I am a visual artist, but my art is not just the canvas that it produces. It's how I live my life. And this is a very, it's like the ant trying to climb up the hill. But I think if more of us just live our life as a piece of art, we will make changes. And that's the smallest thing that I can offer. I do not have a big answer to how art can transform, but I can only transform myself and hopefully some members of my family. and just talk about the benefits that I have had from it and maybe encourage other people to do the same. Does that help? I don't know.
I don't know though, but I really like the idea of like big things and rupture. And you know, there was a beautiful investment that a city councilwoman did in New York, East Harlem, where she had some community artists as well as artists from the Latino, Puerto Rican diaspora come from all different places and do 6 or 7 huge murals on different sides of the building called Los Muros Hablan. And it was just, I mean, it was where it was possible was integrated into other, you know, community festivals and pop-ups and other things going on. And it was like, this was a chance to celebrate, you know? It was a chance to like make something new together, even though the artists were being the ones going and doing it. But I feel like some of those things where it's like a chance to take a break from what we've been doing and to try something different together. It's like some of that like courageous,
the
risky kind of thing. But it does take, I mean, she took her funding that she could get as a city councilwoman and made that investment. And it's like, you got to put, you know, the money behind some of these kinds of things as well. And it's reshaping the direction of resource. And that's kind of big work. It's kind of dangerous work too. So.
It's always about leadership. Who's going to be that person who's going to grab a hold of it and make things possible? I think the artists are always there. I think in terms of art as product, that does nothing to really challenge or break down the power structure. In fact, I think it works the opposite. I think it reinforces the power structure. But the event she just talked about, bringing those things into neighborhoods where you can really transform a place, transform people by its proximity, I think that's, frankly, I think it's where the future of really useful activity lies. And again, I'll talk about artists working with social practice. That is not an approach that's for everyone. I think it takes a special kind of person and talent to do it. But I do think that there's a future there that's going to change the way we experience our environment in about 20 or 30 years.
I think that is our time. But I just noticed something. I think someone commented on it earlier. So I've been to a few of these talks, and I just look at the room and think about who's here and who's not here. And I would say that in many of our efforts to have these conversations, and they've been in different places around the city to promote various accessibility, but that we be really intentional about who we invite to come as audience, as participators for these types of events, because oftentimes we might end up preaching to the choir, and while we're learning things from each other, it's really important that we find some new choir members and people to learn from. And so maybe this is the charge for all of you and the organizers of this for the next one, to go and promote this event in some other communities, and maybe ask what other people might be interested in who may not be on the mailing list or on Facebook or the interwebs, what have you, because a lot of people are not on the internet. Yeah, that's my charge for all of us.
Homework. Duly noted.
Yeah.
Homework.
Yeah. All right.
All right, well,
I want to say thank you to the panelists. Thank you, and all of you did a wonderful job.
and thank you, Vanity. Thank you guys all for coming. Please be sure when you leave to pick up the latest issue of All the Art. I believe
really
it's on the
good.
tables. So, and if you have any ideas about who we might contact, if you're interested in helping us contact other community members, that sort of thing, please let us know on Twitter, on Facebook. My email is joecolburn@gmail.com, so shoot it to me. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely lovely.
Yeah,
listening
this was
to
great.
you.
You guys are awesome. Like, we should.